play a little bit. I got a tennis session in, which I haven't hit a tennis ball in 3 months, so that was embarrassing, but and I'm not good to start with, so it was even worse than normal, but it was lovely. It's a nice way to get to socialise with a friend and have to be socially distant, so we had a lot of fun. So, don't know how your other classes are going, hopefully well. We're at the beginning of week 6 already, which means midterms are coming up very soon. So whilst we don't really have a midterm, for this class, it's just going to be those worksheets and your participation that you've been doing. Pay attention to your other classes, okay, because there may be exams. Those are probably going to be online in one form or another. So just start thinking about that, because it's going to be here before we blink, okay? All right, so today we're going to look at chapter 7, which I think is a really interesting chapter. The statistics on drug abuse amongst college age students are pretty scary, and I just think there's some really interesting information in this chapter that we have to dig down and be honest with ourselves about, right? It's not kind of relevant who else you're honest with, but if you're not honest in here, if you're telling yourself you don't have a problem, and maybe you do, right, then that's something worth a little bit of self-reflection, I think, the information in this chapter. So the first thing I wanted to show you, just in case you have an interest in this, share screen. So this is a chart in Wikipedia, and it has an alphabetical list of 600 odd famous people in different walks of life. A lot of them are artists or actors, but there's also a lot of sport people on the list. All right, so I just wanted to show you baseball picture is a relatively new one that was quite famous. That was 2003, Steve Beckler. So you may have heard of him, that wasn't that long ago. And Steve Beckler used a lot of ephedra, which is a stimulant, and that ephedra probably caused his death because he was seriously abusing that drug, okay? Let's see, who else do we have that's an old one. Let's see if we can find a slightly newer one. There's a lot of cocaine use, wrestlers, so ice skaters, and sometimes it's deliberately suicide, sometimes it's accidental, sometimes the coroner doesn't make a decision whether it was on purpose or accidental. All right, so there's another baseball player. Baseball has a bit of a problem, so there's long distance cycling, football. But yeah, I don't know why baseball has such a problem. I think maybe they play them too much and they start off taking painkillers and then it sort of trend sort of morphs into more serious drug use. I don't know. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that, just in case. It's quite an interesting, though sad, list to look at. Let's come back here. Okay, and we want this PowerPoint. Okay. So, this chapter looks at illicit drugs. So illicit drugs are those that are either illegal or a controlled substance that's being used without prescription. Okay? If you look at table 7.1, this is, I think, a good exercise to start with. Typical drug misuse behaviors, right? So before you read this chapter, think about, how do I use drugs, right? So, okay, I think I'm relatively honest with myself. I'm a lot older than you guys, so I'm not sure that I would have been this honest at your age, right? It's easier to admit your flaws as you get older, I think, because they crop up regularly, and you can't really turn a blind eye to them anymore. So, you know, I've already told you I have to take meds for my anxiety and depression. I use alcohol every day. I occasionally will take ibuprofen if my back really hurts, but not very often. Quite often I'll just put up with it aching because it's just a permanent thing, right? So most of the time I don't take ibuprofen, all right? So I don't think, you know, is that bad, right? My medication is on prescription. You know, I get it from my psychiatrist. It's controlled. Everybody knows, you know, the chemist and the psychiatrist knows what I'm taking. So, okay, all right. So we'll start from that position. And then we look at this table that is misuse, right? So discontinuing the use of a prescribed medication prematurely, even though you've been taking it, you've been instructed to take it for a longer period of time. So that's a classic, right? You don't feel very well, you go to the doctor gives you an antibiotic to take, and he says take it for 10 days, and you get 5 days through your prescription and you feel great. How many of you, try to be honest, right? Remember, this is a safe space. We're not judging. We're just being honest, right? How many of you have or would stop taking your antibiotic on day 6?
I'm one of those people.
You're one of those people? Is that Elizabeth?
I save it, and like if I'm really sick again, I should save it for next time.
There you go, because you don't want to pay again next time, right? And that's one of the problems. I think that's a bigger problem here than maybe in England, because although you do have to pay for prescriptions now, but I mean it's a minimal amount of money compared to what we have to pay over here, right? So, yeah, you know, or you're an athlete and antibiotic is upsetting your tummy just a little bit, and you feel like it's putting you off your training game, right? Let's just put it to one side. So that's drug misuse, technically, right? Mixing drugs all the time, right? Because I take my meds and I drink alcohol, and sometimes I take ibuprofen. And I don't take ibuprofen and not have my glass of wine. In fact, sometimes I use my glass of wine to take the ibuprofen. So, okay. Then I start out saying, no, I'm really careful with the drugs that I take. And now, according to this table, I clearly misuse my drugs. Taking more than the recommended dosage. So if you take a,
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Oh, I'm sure. I was talking to my sister.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I love that you speak up, Elizabeth, so don't stop. Okay, so again, how bad is my headache? You're only supposed to take 1 or 2 aspirin or ibuprofen or Tylenol. How many of you take 3? Because you've got homework to do and you need to get rid of this headache quickly.
Barely.
It matters how bad it is, honestly.
Yeah, right? But if it's bad enough, do you take 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Me too. Okay, so now I'm up to 2 boxes on this table where I'm misusing drugs. So I'm not doing so well here, having thought that I'm pretty careful. Okay? Saving and using medications past their expiration date. So Elizabeth has already said she's saved them. It is, I think, really important that you check the expiration date before you retake anything you've got stuck away in your cupboard. Because that can be a bit of a no-no. Right?
I have a question about like the ibuprofen and the aspirin.
Sure.
Is it bad like if you eat more than that? Because I thought it was just dependent on like your how much you weigh and stuff.
I think if you are, okay, let me back up a minute. The guidelines on the bottle are aimed at an average size person because that's all they can do. That's the best they can do, really, for us, right? If you are 6 foot tall and 300 pounds because you're a shot putter or a linebacker or whatever, right? Then you certainly can take more medication and it not build up in your system in the same way as someone who's smaller. So that is true. However, some of these guidelines, like they'll say 2 at a time and no more than X in 24 hours, right? And I'm not a doctor, so a doctor might jump down my throat for saying this. I think the second number is sometimes the one to pay attention to, because that's the number that they're saying. If you take more than this, you can wreck your stomach lining, or you can do some damage to your kidneys while they're trying to flush the drug out of your system, right? And I could be totally wrong on that. That's how I justify, I guess, that's what I'm doing, really, is if I'm justifying taking 3 ibuprofen when the bottle tells me I need to take 2. Right? And I'm not 6 foot tall and 300 pounds, so I need to be careful. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Good question, though. Because it comes up again when we get to the alcohol information in the next chapter. So, and then the last one is sharing medicines, right? So the example they give is a prescription allergy med. But also, what if you're taking a prescription sleep medication and then your friend is really struggling to sleep? Do you slip them a sleeping tablet? Help them out, right? I must admit, that's one I've never done. I don't know, my parents were really, don't ever give meds to anybody. I don't know. So, I'm not guilty of that one, but I'm not doing so well on some of the others, eh? So, my plan, because there's tons of information in this chapter, I hope you actually enjoy reading it when you get to read the whole chapter this week, because there is a lot of very, very interesting info. So my plan today is just to look at specifically use on campuses and looking at dependence so that we understand that big, complicated picture. And then you can look at, in the chapter, they go through various different types of drugs and the effects they have and what's dangerous about them and things like that. Okay? So, the next table here. So things that aren't considered illicit, like cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, depending what state you're in, right, or what country you're in, inhalants, okay, these are not illegal other than marijuana, depending on where you are. Oh, I guess alcohol is in some states. Is alcohol illegal? No? Okay. And they're considered, what the term used for those is a gateway drug. And so the idea behind that term is that for some people, using these low-level kind of everyday sort of drugs is can lead to getting into something that's a little more risky, right? Like we have a really big meth problem, particularly in Clovis, but in Portales as well, but Clovis is worse. Roswell's pretty bad. You quite often see drug busts as you're driving through Roswell. So, you know, this area of the country does have a problem with illicit, illegal drugs, right? And so there's some graphs and figures in the chapter to support this number, but about 10% of Americans 12 years and older are currently using some form of illicit drug. Often, I think for the younger kids, that's going to be alcohol, or and that's not illicit, or they might be taking their parents' prescription meds, right, out of the kitchen cupboard or out of the bathroom cupboard. Okay? So 12 years and older, That's a pretty scary statistic, I think. 25% of full-time college students took one or more illicit drugs during the past 30 days. Right? So anybody gonna own up to that? Anyone use ganja, marijuana, smoke a joint in the last month?
No.
No judgment. If my mother was here, she'd be raising her hand. Not my drug of use, marijuana, but I know lots of people who do. Right? And that's okay. I'm not totally convinced it should be illegal. I'm not totally convinced it should be legal, but I think there's some good arguments either way, right? Well, I don't know. I don't do enough reading about it, right? So, illegal drugs are, if you look at table 7.2, there's a schedule, and they're kind of put in layers of how dangerous they are, I suppose, right? So LSD, heroin, marijuana, right, don't have currently accepted medical use, although the marijuana is starting to make some inroads there. All right, so they're listed as Schedule 1 drugs. Schedule 1 is no current accepted medical use, high potential for abuse. Now it's going to be interesting with the research on marijuana use, whether or not they have to move marijuana out of Schedule 1 into Schedule 2, right? Schedule 2 is current accepted medical use, medium potential for abuse. So Ritalin, morphine, PCP, OxyContin, right? There's a lot of problems with OxyContin at the moment, and a lot of big media attention on the company that makes OxyContin, because there's a lot of legal battles going on that they knew how dangerous that drug was, but a lot of people have died from OxyContin overdose, right? Anabolic steroids, Tylenol and codeine are Schedule 3, so they've got current accepted medical use and medium attention for abuse. And then you get to like date rape drugs, Valium, Xanax, cut, low potential for abuse. And then Schedule 5 is the lowest potential for abuse, Robitussin, so cough medicines, right? So what are the motivations for people who do use these illicit drugs, right? So we know that they're illegal, or at least illicit, right? Often we take mood-altering drugs initially for just to feel good, to feel a bit better, right? Not for a medical purpose, right? I go to a party, I have a drink because I want to relax and be able to dance and chat to people, and I'm a bit shy, so I have a drink. Okay? And for some people, using alcohol can just stay purely as a pleasurable experience, right? It makes me a little bit relaxed, it allows me to enjoy myself. Not so for everybody. For some people, alcohol acts as a downer rather than an upper, right? Some people use drugs because they've got mood problems, right? They feel depressed, or they feel really stressed, or there's something very unpleasant going on that they can't just walk away from, and they want to escape from that, right? With some drugs, it's curiosity, right? Particularly for teenagers. I don't know what this is going to feel like. I want to try it out and see. Right? For some, especially like my parents' generation, the cigarette advertising was very sexy, right? Very sexy. The use of cigarettes in popular movies, right, and films was very sexy. It was chic. It was, right, and so people would start smoking because they thought it made them look attractive, right? My mum started smoking when she was 12. So what do you do? I mean, it's kind of hard to give that up. She never gave it up. She gave it up for periods of time, like 3 or 4 months, and then she'd go back, right? So think about what the motivation is. You know, as I said, we don't want to judge people because everybody has their own life, their own problems, their own perspective to deal with. And you don't know that person's, you know, there's that age-old saying, you know, you can't judge me until you walk in my shoes, right? You don't know what my life is like. And I think that that's an important thing to bear in mind because we want to treat people kindly. Doesn't mean we don't want to intervene, particularly if this is a friend who needs help, right? But we need to be kind about it. So what is drug dependence, right? So let's think first about, does everybody who tries drugs, whether that be alcohol, cigarettes, something more problematical, perhaps, if you want to use that word, like marijuana or cocaine, or right? Does everybody who tries it become a drug user? What do you think? Right? Especially think back to when you were teenagers. Right? Everybody in your circle of friends, everybody who tried a drug, including cigarettes, alcohol, or anything stronger, right? Did they all become drug users, illicit drug users? Come on, guys, talk to me.
I don't think everybody chose to be a drug user. I just think depending like how your lifestyle is, how it goes. Because like in my neighborhood, we actually have literal crackheads.
Right? So, you know, for some of those crack users, maybe they started off just by drinking alcohol, right? Maybe they didn't. Who knows? Does everybody who tries a cigarette become addicted to nicotine and cigarettes?
I don't know.
No? Some people can, ooh, bless you. Some people can just smoke one and never have another one, or smoke one once a week at a party and not smoke the rest of the week, right? So drug dependence is a really interesting area of research because we don't totally know why some people become addicted and some people don't, right? So the definition of drug dependence or addiction is that the individual has a habitual pattern of taking the drug, and that habitual pattern results in a compulsive need for the drug that is physical and psychological. Okay, so it's quite a specific definition to deal with. And once you meet that definition, you got a problem, because this means now you can't go without that drug now, right? I have to have it. I can't just give it up anymore, right? And sometimes that need for the drug will start to interfere with your everyday life, right? With causing arguments at home, or causing you to miss work, or fall asleep at work, or not do a good job at work, right? Actually, let me just go back here for 1 minute. So, you guys aren't talking much, so you have to keep listening to me and my boring stories, right? If I read that definition of drug dependence and I look at my wine and gin and tonics, right? I don't have a physical need for that. Do I have a psychological need? I would be tempted to say yes, because I use it as my switch off, like my day is over and now I'm going into my evening. Right? So that psychological habit of pouring a glass of wine, and that means I'm on downtime now. Okay? So just to make you think, I'm just trying to give you examples to make you think outside the box as you're reading the chapter, all right? Because what you can learn by reading this book, and I think particularly the next couple of chapters, could change everything about your health and wellness, right? But you have to be honest with yourselves as you're doing the reading. So, what is physiological or psychological dependence? All right, so physiological means that, or happens when people take certain drugs, particularly psychoactive drugs, and your body makes physiological adjustments over time to continue to function as normally as possible, right? So you become physically dependent, right? So the word tolerance means that I can take more and more of the drug without getting the adverse reaction to the drug. Also means that I need more and more of the drug to get the feeling that I started taking the drug for in the first place. Right? So tolerance can occur with all kinds of drugs. Right? And I have to take more. Right? And that's a big problem right now with the COVID situation, because people can't go out, they can't go do things, they can't recreate as well as normal, right? And so people are turning to, as Chief Malden said to us the other week, you know, drug use is on the rise right now, right? Alcohol problems are on the rise right now, and, you know, people who are drunk might hit their partner more often, so we're seeing more familial abuse. Okay? Because of the situation we're all in. It's stressful. This is scary. It's not just stressful, it's scary. We don't know when it's going to end. No one will give us okay, it's just going to be 3 more months, and then we can walk out the door and everything will be safe, right? We don't have that. So it's a ongoing, infinite, who knows? And that's very scary for a lot of people, right? Then we've got withdrawal. So withdrawal can include trembling, anxiety, can be painful for some. Withdrawal symptoms, if you're addicted to barbiturates, can actually cause death. Okay? Fetal alcohol syndrome babies, so if the baby is born to a mother who uses alcohol while she's pregnant, and I mean uses alcohol like me with my alcohol, not 1 glass of wine a week, okay? But a mum that drinks regularly during her pregnancy, fetal alcohol syndrome babies have to go through withdrawal when they're born, because all that alcohol that they're receiving is coming in through the mum's bloodstream via the placenta. So when the placenta gets cut, their alcohol supply gets cut. And then these poor babies have to go through alcohol withdrawal because the nurses aren't going to feed them alcohol. So, tolerance, I'm getting used to it. I can take more of it without, so, you know, again, with a drug, one drug makes me, you know, a bit loopy. The more I take it, the less loopy I get, so the more I have to take. Right? Psychological dependence often occurs when people are using the drug for because they're stressed or they're bored, right? Another problem right now. We've got all these people that are just sitting at home bored to tears, right? Or their job is very, very stressful. Okay? And so psychological dependence can give us that need, like, I can't deal with this on my own, I have to have the drug, right? And so sometimes it's difficult to identify psychological dependence because, you know, if there's someone that just goes to, so in England, it's very typical if you work in a big city, in a building, you know, and you're doing some kind of office job, it's very typical for a group of people to go for a drink after work at the pub that's next door, right? That's a very typical lifestyle in England. So, you know, if that person goes for a drink every day at the pub, is that behavior driven because they want to go and socialize with their mates? Or is that behavior driven because they crave the beer? Right? So it's from the outside, psychological dependence can be quite difficult to identify. Right? And just keep thinking to yourself, is there a difference between habitual use and dependency and abuse? Remember your definition of dependency? I have a friend who I love dearly, and she makes me laugh because we're kind of similar. She says she's a functioning alcoholic, right? So, like me, her wine drinking is habitual. She has a couple of glasses of wine every night, right? Is she dependent on that wine? Certainly not physically, as far as I'm aware. Is she psychologically? It's a habit, right? So, I don't know, right? Is that psychological dependency, or is it just a habitual pattern? Right? It's an interesting question, I think. And again, I'm just trying to give you ideas to dig into your own behaviors as you're reading the chapter, right? So, if we take that definition of drug dependency, what's the risk of becoming dependent on the drug? All right, so becoming dependent on some substance or other, right? So now I'm addicted, I have to have it. It's very complex, which is why not everybody develops addiction, right? There are some biological reasons, so some genetic tendencies that lead some people to be more at risk for becoming addicted to a drug than other people. There are social and environmental factors, home environments. If the parents are abusing drugs, then, is it more likely that the children will become drug abusers when that's what they've been modeled and that's what they've grown up in? Protective factors are things like strong monitoring by the parents. So my drugs are in childproof tubs, and they're up at the top of the cabinet, and I keep the cabinet locked, right? What's going on at school? How are they monitoring whether or not there's alcohol at school? Okay, so ENMU is an alcohol-free campus. If you're caught drinking on campus, you will get sacked. It's happened several times in the time that I've been here. Okay, so what about in the schools, in the high school? How are they monitoring alcohol use in school? Right? Might be a question. Right? Children who are successful with their academics are less likely. Right? Being successful at school is a protective factor because I'm less likely to want to sabotage that by getting drunk or by getting high, right? So we've got these really complex issues around why people get addicted, but there are lots of protective factors where we can take care of and try to prevent teenagers and young adults from getting addicted. As a teacher on campus, I see quite a lot of drug abuse among students. It's not that hard to pick out the student in class that had smoked a joint on his way into class, quite apart from the fact that you can smell it, right? It's not that hard to pick that person out. Okay? There are physical symptoms of smoking a joint that make it very easy for me at the front of the class to go, I've got to talk to that student again about coming to class in that state. You know. Questions, thoughts, comments?
No.
Oh, guys, this conversation is usually so much fun in the classroom. I know it's hard when we're not in the classroom, but try to speak up a little bit, because it gets really difficult to get you excited about learning this stuff and you know, really digging into your health and wellness. Right? I don't want to bore you rigid all semester with my health and wellness. Right? I want you guys to try and engage a little bit, okay? All right, so any questions? Wednesday, don't forget to do your applied questions at the end of the chapter. Friday on the syllabus is highlighted because I was hoping, I have a friend who was a student here, and she has in the past come and talked to you about her drug abuse and suicide attempt. But I'm very excited because she's packing up her house and moving to Idaho for a new job. So I can't bring her on campus now. So I'm looking for something else to do as our Friday activity this week. So keep an eye out on Blackboard, and I will put up an announcement about what that activity will be probably tomorrow. I've just got to do a little bit of digging around. I've got an idea of what I want to do, I just don't know how, I don't know enough about it yet. So, okay? Alrighty. Don't forget, if you have questions about anything, I have office hours this afternoon. Okay, you can come into office hours and ask if you've got any concerns about anything. All right? Bye.